Imagine this. You're already running late. Breakfast is on the table. School starts in 30 minutes. You call your child's name. Yusuf, it's time to get dressed. No answer. You call again. Still nothing. Now your voice gets louder. Yusuf, didn't you hear me? Your child finally looks up. Not with anger, not with defiance, just surprise, as if they had no idea you had been calling them. Sound familiar? If you're a parent, a grandparent, a teacher, or someone who cares for children, you've probably lived this moment more times than you can count. And every time it happens, the same thought quietly slips into your mind. Why doesn't this child ever listen? Some people call it stubbornness. Others call it disrespect. Some even worry they're raising a child who simply doesn't care. But what if almost everything we've been taught to believe about not listening is missing an important piece of the story? What if this behavior isn't always about refusing to listen, but about something happening inside a child's mind that most adults never notice? Because here's the truth. Children don't see the world the way adults do.
They don't think like adults. They don't process instructions like adults. And they certainly don't experience attention the way adults do. That difference changes everything. Today, we're going to step into your child's world. Not to excuse bad behavior, not to blame parents, but to understand what your child may be trying to tell you without saying a single word. Because once you understand what's happening beneath the behavior, your response may never be the same again.
So, if children aren't always ignoring us, what is actually happening inside their minds? The answer begins with something surprisingly simple. Your child isn't always refusing to pay attention. Sometimes they're paying too much attention. Think about the last time you watched an exciting movie. Someone called your name, but you didn't hear them the first time. Not because you were being rude, not because you didn't care. Your brain was completely focused on one thing. Children experience this even more intensely. When Yusuf sat on the floor building his block tower, he wasn't just stacking colorful pieces of plastic. In his mind, he was building the tallest tower in the world. Every block mattered. Every choice mattered. Every second mattered. To an adult, it looked like a simple game. To Yusuf, it was a mission. And this is something many adults accidentally overlook. Young children are still learning how to switch their attention from one thing to another. Their brains are developing every single day. That means moving from play to getting dressed, or from drawing to cleaning up, can feel much harder than it looks. This doesn't mean children should ignore instructions. It doesn't mean parents should stop setting rules. It simply means that before we label a child as disrespectful, we should ask ourselves one important question. Could my child be so deeply focused that changing attention feels difficult right now? That one question changes everything. Because when we understand the reason behind a behavior, we stop reacting only to what we see. We begin responding to what our child is actually experiencing. But deep focus isn't the only reason children seem like they aren't listening. Sometimes a child hears every single word you say. They understand exactly what you asked, and yet they still don't move. Why? The answer has nothing to do with attention. It has everything to do with emotions. And once you understand this next reason, you may never see not listening the same way again. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Sometimes children aren't deeply focused at all. Sometimes they hear every single word you say. They want to listen. They want to do what you've asked. But in that moment, their emotions are simply too big. Imagine this. Have you ever been so upset that someone was talking to you, but you couldn't really take in what they were saying? Maybe you were angry. Maybe you were scared. Maybe you were close to tears. You heard the words,
but your mind couldn't process them. Children experience moments like this far more often than adults do. Let's go back to Yusuf. One afternoon, after school, Amina asked him a simple question. Yusuf, can you put your school bag in your room? Normally, it wasn't a difficult request, but that day, Yusuf didn't move. He stood quietly, looking at the floor. Amina asked again. Still no response. She was about to raise her voice when she noticed something. His eyes were watery. His shoulders had dropped. His little hands were tightly holding the straps of his school bag. Something wasn't right. Instead of asking the question a third time, she walked closer, knelt beside him, and softly asked, Yusuf, did something happen at school today? For a few seconds, he said nothing. Then the tears came. A classmate had laughed at his drawing. He had carried that sadness home all day. In that moment, the problem wasn't that Yusuf wasn't listening. The problem was that his heart was too heavy to respond. And how many children are carrying feelings like that without knowing how to explain them? Sometimes what looks like disobedience is actually disappointment. Sometimes it's fear. Sometimes embarrassment. Sometimes loneliness. And sometimes children don't even have the words to describe what they're feeling. So instead, their behavior speaks for them. That's why one of the most powerful questions a parent can ask isn't, why aren't you listening? It's, I wonder what my child is feeling right now. Because that one question changes the conversation completely. And yet, there's one more reason children don't always respond. It's something almost every loving parent does without even realizing it. Many parents believe that if a child doesn't listen the first time, the answer is to repeat the instruction. Once, twice, 3 times, until frustration takes over. It seems reasonable. After all, if they didn't respond, maybe they just didn't hear you. But here's something surprising. The more we repeat the same instruction without changing how we connect with the child, the easier it becomes for that instruction to fade into the background. Think about a sound you hear every day. The ticking of a clock. The hum of a fan. After a while, you barely notice it there. Not because the sound disappears, but because your brain learns to tune it out. Something similar can happen when children hear the same instruction over and over again. Yusuf, put your shoes on. No response. Yusuf, your shoes. Still no response. Yusuf, how many times do I have to tell you? By now, both parent and child are frustrated. The instruction has turned into a battle. Not because either one wanted a fight, but because they lost connection with each other. The next morning, Amina decided to try something different. Instead of calling from the kitchen, she walked into the living room. She knelt until she was at Yusuf's eye level. She gently touched his shoulder. She waited until he looked at her. Then she smiled and said, Yusuf, it's time to put your shoes on. Can we do it together? This time, he nodded. He stood up, and without another reminder, he put on his shoes. Was it magic? No, it was connection. Children often respond better when they feel that you're speaking with them, not simply at them. That doesn't mean every request will work perfectly. Children are still children. They'll have difficult days. They'll test limits. They'll get distracted. But small moments of connection can make a big difference. And there's something else many parents don't realize. Sometimes the way we give an instruction is just as important as the instruction itself. But what if you've tried everything? You've spoken calmly. You've walked closer. You've made eye contact. and still your child doesn't do what you asked. At that point, it's easy to think they're choosing not to listen. But there's another possibility that many adults never consider. What if your child understood only part of what you said? Imagine someone walks up to you and says, "I need you to go upstairs, find the blue folder, check the second drawer, bring the papers back, then call your uncle before you leave." Could you remember every step perfectly? Maybe, maybe not. Now imagine you're only 6 years old. Your brain is still developing. You're excited, you're distracted, you're thinking about the game you were just playing. Now listen to what many children hear every day. "Yusuf, go to your room, put your toys away, wash your hands, bring your homework, then come back to the table." That's a lot. To an adult, it sounds like one simple instruction. To a young child, it can sound like a long list that's difficult to hold on to. The moment they remember the first step, they've already forgotten the second. Not because they don't care, not because they're lazy, but because their brains are still learning how to organize and remember multiple instructions. The next afternoon, Amina decided to try something different again. Instead of giving Yusuf 5 instructions, she gave him just 1. "Yusuf, let's start by putting the blocks into the blue basket." That's all. Yusuf looked at the basket, picked up the blocks, and started cleaning. When he finished, Amina smiled. "Great job! Now let's put the books on the shelf." One small step, then another, then another. Within a few minutes, the room was clean. No shouting, no arguments, no tears. Sometimes the goal isn't to make instructions louder, it's to make them clearer. Because when children succeed, they build confidence, and confident children become more willing to cooperate over time. But even clear instructions won't always work, because there's one final reason children sometimes don't listen, and it has nothing to do with their ears. It has everything to do with one simple human need: the need to feel understood. If you're watching this as a parent, I want you to think about your child for just a moment. Not the child who leaves toys on the floor, not the child who refuses to wear their shoes, not the child who ignores you when you're in a hurry. Think about your child, the little person who runs into your arms after a long day, the one who laughs so hard they can barely breathe, the one who still looks for you when they're scared. Because underneath every difficult behavior, there is still a child who wants to feel safe. Children don't wake up in the morning planning to make your day harder. They don't sit in their room thinking, "How can I frustrate my mom today?" Most of the time, they're trying to solve problems with a brain that's still growing. They're learning how to manage big emotions, how to pay attention, how to control their impulses, and how to understand a world that often feels much bigger than they are. Let's go back to Yusuf one last time. A few days after the backpack incident, Amina noticed something. Whenever she shouted from another room, Yusuf rarely responded. But when she walked over, knelt beside him, looked into his eyes, and spoke calmly, he almost always listened. Not because he suddenly became a different child, but because he felt connected. Children are far more likely to cooperate with someone who makes them feel seen. Connection doesn't remove boundaries. It doesn't mean saying yes to everything. It doesn't mean letting children do whatever they want. It simply means reminding them, "I'm with you, even while I'm guiding you." Sometimes the strongest parenting tool isn't a louder voice, it's a calmer presence. And that calm presence teaches something much bigger than obedience. It teaches trust. It teaches security. It teaches children that home is a place where they can learn without being afraid. Because when children feel emotionally safe, listening becomes easier. Not every time, not overnight, but little by little. And that's how lasting change begins.
But there's one question that many parents are probably asking right now. If my child isn't always being disrespectful, does that mean I should just let the behavior continue? Not at all. Understanding your child doesn't mean removing boundaries. In fact, children need boundaries. They help children feel safe. They teach responsibility. They prepare children for the real world. The difference is how those boundaries are taught. Imagine learning to ride a bicycle. Would you learn better if someone shouted every time you lost your balance? Or if someone stayed beside you, encouraged you, and helped you try again? Children learn in much the same way. Correction is important, but correction works best when it's paired with connection. Let's see how this looked in Amina and Yusuf's home. One Saturday morning, Yusuf was so busy playing that he ignored Amina when she asked him to turn off the television and come for breakfast. This time, Amina didn't pretend it was okay. She walked over calmly. She waited until Yusuf looked at her. Then she said, "I know you're enjoying your cartoon. It's hard to stop when you're having fun." Yusuf nodded. He felt understood. Then she continued, "Breakfast is ready now. After we eat, you can come back and finish watching." No shouting, no threats, no long lecture. Just kindness and a clear boundary. Yusuf wasn't happy about stopping. Most children wouldn't be. But he got up. Not because he was afraid, but because he knew his mother meant what she said. Children don't need perfect parents. They need parents who are calm enough to guide them and consistent enough to help them know what to expect. That doesn't mean you'll always get it right. No parent does. There will be days when you're tired, days when you lose your patience, days when you wish you could start over. And that's okay. Because what children remember most isn't whether you were perfect. They remember whether they felt loved, whether they felt heard, whether they knew you would come back, reconnect, and keep showing up for them. That's what builds trust, and trust is one of the strongest foundations for cooperation.
Before you leave, I'd like to ask you one simple question. When your child doesn't listen, what do you see first? Do you see a child who's trying to make your life difficult? Or do you see a child who's still learning how to manage a world that's completely new to them? Because the answer to that question changes everything. Just because a child can speak doesn't mean they know how to explain disappointment. Just because they can run doesn't mean they know how to slow down when they're excited. And just because they hear your words doesn't always mean they know how to respond in that moment. Every child is learning, every single day. Some lessons take weeks, some take months, some take years. And that's okay, because childhood isn't a race, it's a journey. So the next time your child doesn't respond straight away, take one slow breath. Pause before assuming the worst. Look into their eyes. Ask yourself, what might my child be experiencing right now? That one question may not solve every difficult moment, but it might change the way both of you experience it. Because behind every behavior, there is a child. And behind every child, there is a growing mind, a growing heart, and someone who still needs your guidance, your patience, and above all, your love. Children communicate long before they know how to explain themselves. Sometimes with words, sometimes with tears, sometimes with silence, and sometimes through behavior. That doesn't mean every behavior should be accepted. It means we begin with understanding, and then we guide with love. Because discipline without understanding can create fear, but discipline with understanding builds trust. And one day, when your child has grown older, They probably won't remember every instruction you gave, but they'll remember how you made them feel. Whether home felt safe, whether someone took the time to look beyond the behavior and see the little heart behind it. That's exactly why this channel exists, to help us hear what kids don't say. If this video helped you understand your child a little better, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Like it if you want more parents to see this kind of content. And if you know a parent, teacher, or grandparent who needs to hear this, share it with them. Every behavior is a message. We just have to learn how to listen. I'll see you in the next one.